Before I introduce our very special guest speaker, who I'm extremely honoured to attend at very short notice, I just want to say a few words. Firstly, again, I want to thank you so much for coming down. This started as an idea to get 25 people to stand out the front of Willow Grove with a clock in order to generate enough media interest to send a message to Geoff Lee and to Premier Gladys Berejiklian that, quite frankly, we completely reject the idea that they're going to destroy this beautiful building and the 7 St George's Terraces to make way for 2 50-storey tower blocks in the middle of Parramatta. I mean, the response has simply been enormous. We got 12,500 signatures on our petition opposing this plan, 10,000 in a week. We've had support from a whole range of community groups. I want to acknowledge, there's a whole range of them. I can't name all of them, but I do want to acknowledge Save the Powerhouse, which has also been very helpful in spreading the message, and everyone associated with the Ultimo movement. This is really exciting. It's really great that you could all be here. But is it any wonder? I mean, just take a look at that beautiful building behind you. Building 1870, okay? And now I just want you to imagine a wrecking ball coming into that building, a bulldozer coming into that building and knocking it down. I mean, can you imagine anything more absurd in this city today?
Guess what they're doing at Cumberland Hospital?
Look, and I know I'm preaching to the converted, but this has been a dud deal from start to finish. The idea that you're going to destroy a heritage building in Ultimo to make way for residential tower blocks, and then you're going to destroy heritage buildings, 8 heritage buildings in Parramatta to make way for tower blocks. You're going to pick up what's remaining from the rubble in Ultimo, move it to Parramatta, and then once you get these 2 50-storey tower blocks, you're going to put a basement museum at the bottom of it. That flood. And we're supposed to be grateful. I read Geoff Lee in the newspaper the other day. He said, there's still decisions to be made. This is good for Western Sydney. We're finally getting arts and culture. Well, thanks a lot, mate. We're getting a basement museum at the bottom of 2 tower blocks. We really appreciate it.
Doesn't Gladys realise that the government's falling out of the residential market?
And it's not just Willow Grove. We know that. We in Parramatta know that. And I think part of the reason why there has been such an enormous reaction here is because we saw what happened with Parramatta War Memorial Hall. Built in 1959, it was just bulldozed over. And I think after that, the message has been very clear here in Parramatta that we need to stand up for ourselves, we need to stand up for this area, because quite frankly, otherwise the state government's just going to come in and bulldoze the whole lot. And we know that it's not just this building and the 7 St George's Terraces. We know that the 190-year-old Royal Oak Hotel is next on the chopping block. They're going to run a tram line for the middle of it, a tram line that nobody wants, the small businesses don't want, the heritage community don't want. We're on a unity ticket there. Only the state government wants it. And then there's the Fleet Street Heritage Precinct in North Parramatta, home to 77 state heritage listed buildings. Who knows what's going to happen there?
We know, high rises.
High rises. I mean, the government keeps coming out with various thought bubbles about what they're going to do with the area. But I think, as you rightly say, high rise seems to be the plan. And it's a real shame because that area, in that precinct, with all of those beautiful heritage buildings in that area, it has a wonderful opportunity to create an arts and cultural precinct in the middle of Parramatta. A museum in Parramatta can go in the Fleet Street Heritage Precinct in North Parramatta. We don't have to knock down the heritage buildings that we already have to put in tower blocks and then put a basement at the bottom of it. the last thing I want to say is, I did ask you to bring clocks, and thank you for those who have. And there's two reasons for that. The first reason is, it's to send a message to Geoff Lee to wake up. Wake up, mate.
10 o'clock. Wake up, Jeff. Wake up, Jeff. Wake up, Jeff.
Because you did nothing on the pool, you've done nothing on this. Dead set why you're here.
Time to go.
We all vote.
We all vote indeed. And the other reason I asked you to bring a clock is to acknowledge that this takes time. History takes time. We're talking about 150 years here, okay? 150 years that's going to be knocked down in a matter of moments.
Time's running out, Aidan.
Time is definitely running out. And on that note, I am very privileged to hand over to Mr. Brian Powyer from the, and I've written a full introduction, but I can't find it at the moment. But
What about the 26th of March next year?
yeah, that's okay. Brian, do you want to come up, please? Now, I'm incredibly privileged to have Brian here today. I only emailed Brian on Friday night because we found out the council gates would be open on Friday afternoon. And I called him yesterday and I said, Brian, we'd be very honoured to have you to speak. So I'm extremely honoured to have Brian here. Brian, please introduce yourself and go.
Thank you, Aidan. For those who don't know, my name is Brian Powyer, and I'm the current chair of the National Trust of New South Wales, and the National Trust of Australia in itself. I'm a local resident, and if you ask my mum, she'll tell you that he's not really the president of the National Trust or anything like that. It's just good old Brian, and he's a naughty, naughty boy. And I guess I'm planning on being rather naughty going into the future in terms of managing a particular site and associated areas, because as we all know, the reason we're here today is that it comes into our own, I don't know how you describe it, our own definition of ourselves, our own understanding of who we are as individuals, and more importantly, what we stand for and what we believe in and what makes us a true community. It's easy to pass those words around, but community is important to everybody here, and I'm sure many others who would have joined us today, given that we had a little bit more notice to let people go. So can I thank you personally for being here, for showing your interest and giving your support to what I think is a very, very critical point in our general history as a city, and the way we need to travel forward as a city is going to be defined very much from what comes out of this gathering today. In terms of the National Trust, we support everything that's happening here on the ground today and going into the future. Unfortunately for the National Trust, this is typical. I would get 30 cases a week where communities write to us about similar situations. And when you analyse that, you find out that these sites are frequently on a heritage list. They're already supposedly protected in some sense by that legislation. They have very, very strong and vocal community support. It can't be said that, oh, had we known, we could have done something about it. The support here is local and it's very, very vocal. Of course, there's always another major development. They use that word major all the time, and that needs to be examined in this case, as already explained by Aidan in his introduction. But there's always some other reason, a better reason than heritage, to progress with the site. And then finally, and this is increasingly so, there seems to be always government involvement or government intervention, which makes it difficult in terms of process to get your voice heard, recognised and acted upon. And I know reference has already been made today as that there has been a lack of that political voice in this situation, and we need to get that activated. We need to make that loud and clear. So if we run through a couple of those things very quickly, and I don't want to take too much of your time, but the heritage listing, it's important that we understand that heritage listing isn't equal. The only place you're protected in law in terms of demolition and removal of sites is under state heritage listing. At the local level, that protection is not in the legislation, and so it's rather easy to make decisions and enact processes that allow demolition when they're only at the local level. And while there are reports that this is on the state heritage list, it is not. This building is only really covered by its local listing on the local council listing. So the protection for demolition of those processes is not there. The National Trust has a campaign at the moment asking that at all levels of that the protection be equal across all of those levels. Not even protection at the national or the World Heritage List against demolition. That's only protected at the state level. And so we're asking that once you're on one of those lists, wherever you are, then you get the full protection of the intent of that legislation. And we'll ask you to join us in that campaign as we move forward. It's very relevant in this situation. The other one is community support, and as I said, it's quite evident today, and I'm sure that petition has gone well over the 12,000 now in the space. I think it was three days, 36 hours or 72 hours, whatever, 12,000 signatures, 12,500 now, and that just shows that this community fully understands the threat that these buildings are under, and we need to make sure that those voices are carried into the places where decisions are made. The whole thing with this is that you end up with a loss of trust in the legislation, you end up with a loss of trust in the processes, and it leads you to confusion. You really don't know as a community member who or what represents your view, how that is protected under law. And we lose faith, we lose confidence in the process, and that's a very, very dangerous thing in any community at all. So it's important that that all be restored and put back into the right proportions. Major developments, of course. The trust position is, if we've got legislation, if we've got heritage legislation in place, why don't we start from that position? Why do we say, oh, we've got another option here, another development, and it's got to have some economic grounding and it's got to have some commercial value, and we work through that, and then at the end we say, oh yes, and there's something to do with heritage, maybe it doesn't matter so much. So what we're asking is, why doesn't the argument when any property is developed start with the heritage position? How do you retain the heritage? How do you keep the heritage in place? And then add on or do whatever you might need to do. It's important that we start from that perspective. And I would be arguing that you support that view strongly. And finally, I'll just come to the government in itself. And I'm not a person who talks like this normally, because I have to be careful what I say. But it's been shameful. It's absolutely been shameful as to how this site and associated areas has been managed. We had to have an upper house inquiry. You people won't know personally how much energy that absorbed out of groups such as the National Trust and others who were behind the scenes driving that to happen. It took an enormous amount of energy. People often ask me, oh, what's the National Trust doing about it? And they sort of think I should be here with some sort of flag, waving it to say stop, stop. The National Trust also works at that very high level within or behind the scenes of government. And to bring that inquiry into place, and then to finally get a document that was said to be a business plan was an absolute disgrace. And it says something about us too, because we've allowed that to go on in a sense, and it's time that we said that's enough, no more of that. So I'm asking you, to keep that argument going forward and support those who are going to challenge that documentation. I'm sure there are some others today that will speak about it. And finally, just I think you need to use the political process. use the political process to your advantage. And by that, I mean, go to your local candidates, go to your local members, ask them the questions and make them put it on the record. Make sure that you're putting in the submissions when the submissions are due or when the ideas are called for. Get them in. Don't leave it to the National Trust. Get your own voice into the argument. And then finally, somebody mentioned it earlier, there are elections and you need to know at this point where you think your priority should lie when that moment comes about. So I've spoken enough, I've been raving a little bit. What I can't do though is leave without a solution. It's no use standing here trying to criticise others or condemn others. And so the National Trust's position at the moment in regards to Willow Grove would be that we believe that you should call for a moratorium on any action to demolish any heritage structure in this vicinity. And in doing that, you need to clarify the various planning proposals. This is already included in a couple of other plans, and this other plan comes over the top and diminishes them. There's supposed to be a great civic walkway coming down through here to open up this land, and including the beautiful grounds that we're in now, the beautiful building in it, and that seems to be dismissed by this other suggestion or idea of the development of the site. Secondly, insist that at all times that the integration of the heritage of this site be included in any planning or any redevelopment of this site. This must remain in some form and in an honest form going into the future. And then finally, establish a mechanism for community involvement and monitoring of the progress of what emanates following this meeting today. Make sure that you do get a tab onto it and that you can monitor it. So thank you for bearing with me. I encourage you, the Trust will be behind you in whatever way we can possibly do so. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Brian. I would have let you speak for another half an hour if you wanted to. Next I want to call up, please, Deputy Lord Mayor Michelle Garrard to say a few words.
Hi everybody, I won't take up too much of everybody's time, but I think everything that Brian has said and Aidan has said is right on the money. As a council, we unanimously opposed anything happening to Willow Grove, but Councillor Davis will talk a little bit more about that in a second. In relation to my party, I'm independent. I've not got involved in too much of either side. However, I will state there was one decision that I made at the local government elections, and that was intimate as to which team I work with from a political perspective, and that wasn't the other team. That was this team, and the reason for that was one of the conditions as to who I work with was Willow Grove, was North Parramatta, was Save Parramatta Pool, and I couldn't get the assurances of support from the Liberal Party. So on that note, I'll do everything within my power, and I will not support in the chamber anything to go here with Willow Grove, all the information that we've been provided, and I do not support the museum on the riverbank either. I don't mind if they want to, Parramatta needs a museum, but there's plenty of other places that they can put it, and it doesn't have to be here. So on that note, I think I'll finish it there, but you have my full support in relation to everything that we're trying to do here with Willow Grove. And I'll hand back to Aidan. I think we're going to can I call the former Lord Mayor? He's got, okay, yep, no worries.
Thanks very much, Michelle. Next I just want to ask Julia Thin to come up, please. Julia Thin is here representing Luke Foley, the leader of the opposition party. We did invite Premier Berejiklian to speak as well. Unfortunately, we did not get a response.
Thanks very much, Aidan. I'm Julia Thin. I'm the state member for Granville. I'm also a former Lord Mayor of Parramatta and represented this part of Parramatta for 17 years. So those of you who don't know me won't know this, but those of you who do know that I'm incredibly passionate about Parramatta's heritage. Luke couldn't make it along today, but when I was speaking to him, I actually asked if I could come along and represent him. I was just going to come along as a local resident to show my support, but this is incredibly important. And The only reason we know that there's a plan to demolish Willow Grove and St George's Terrace is because of the Upper House inquiry, and then after that, when the Upper House inquiry forced the government to release the business case, they actually tried to resist that. It was only when there was a censure motion moved against Don Harwin that the business case came out, and we found that this beautiful building, Willow Grove, and of course St George's Terrace, are part of the plan to be demolished in their preferred business case. They claim it's going to cost an additional $45 million to not demolish these buildings. That is only an opportunity cost for 50-storey towers. In every single picture we've seen of the powerhouse, they don't show you the 50-storey towers. They show you the podium that's going to contain not even all of the Powerhouse Museum. It's going to contain part of it, part is going to Castle Hill, and part of it will be retained in Ultimo. And in terms of getting things out of the museum in Ultimo, a lot of the heritage building there is going to actually be damaged in the process of moving it out. And a lot of those artefacts are very significant in and of themselves, but you don't protect heritage by destroying heritage, whether it be in Parramatta or in Ultimo. This proposal is an absolute disgrace. Parramatta deserves a world-class arts and cultural facility, and no one is in disagreement about that. But what we don't deserve is to have our heritage destroyed. Parramatta has more significant heritage buildings than anywhere in Australia. We have World Heritage listed parts of Parramatta Park around the Governor's Domain. We've got a huge number of heritage listed properties, and it's been a big fight, and it's not always a successful fight, to protect many of them over many years. I served on council with Garrard, who is here today. He's another former Lord Mayor, and there have been many times where we've had to fight against developers and the state government to protect this city's heritage. I wish we'd said that we won the fight and it was all over and everyone realised how important these things are, but not even our state government recognises how important this heritage is. And to see it as just some opportunity cost, which is essentially a gift to residential tower developers, I think is an absolute disgrace. Labor opposes the relocation of the Powerhouse Museum and the carving up of the Powerhouse Museum into three different wings. We want a world-class arts and cultural facility, but we do not want it to be at the expense of Willow Grove and St George's Terrace. And we do not think it needs to be. Now, the council acquired this property, as was mentioned before, to join a walkway and a civic area from the river back to the centre of Parramatta. That's why it was acquired. It wasn't acquired for the purposes of demolishing it for 50-storey residential tower blocks. But that's what's happening now, and I think it's an absolute disgrace. So I really want to thank all of you for coming out this afternoon. I thank everybody who signed the petition so far, and we do need to keep the pressure on. We can't lose these beautiful buildings for a museum that's going to cost $34 to visit and is really nothing more than the basement podium level of two 50-storey apartment blocks. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Julia. Could I please ask Councillor Donna Davis to come up and say a few words?
Thanks everyone. Look, I know everyone's waiting there. At least it's a bit sunnier than it was, than it could have been. But thank you so much for coming out today. As Deputy Lord Mayor Michelle Garrard mentioned, there was a motion in the council at the last meeting, and I actually put up a notice of motion that had some key points about why we need to protect Willow Grove and St George's Terrace and why they are important to our city. The Lord Mayor then did a Lord Mayoral minute, and I actually then moved other amendments to that motion, which even gave us more force to actually try and take some action. And the wonderful thing is that in that chamber there was unanimous support. As Michelle mentioned, regardless of party politics in Macquarie Street, the council is standing strong on this at the moment, and I'm hoping, and those councillors that are here today, we're hoping that that support will continue. The motion that was moved, there were a couple of key things that were in that motion. One of them did link back to something that Julia was just mentioning, and that is the purchase of this site and the handover of this site. This site, along with the swimming pool, along with the decisions made about North Parramatta Precinct, those decisions have all been made on the watch of the administrator, an administrator coincidentally appointed by the state government. And those decisions were made when we didn't have a publicly elected council. So when we were elected back in September last year, we then had discovered all these decisions, and we're still discovering decisions that were made during that time that have major ramifications on our city. And trying to actually undo some of those is quite challenging because of the binding legal matters surrounding them. As far as Willow Grove is concerned, we have said that we want further information about the valuation of this site when the state government purchased it. There's some very, very, very sneaky deals that have gone on here, and the fact that they have paid us $140 million for this site when we believe that a private developer offered the same amount for a third of this site. You do start to wonder, has the state government actually purchased this off the council at less than the value that it really is? And in purchasing it, why haven't they shown the respect for our heritage? This may not be Macquarie Street, but it's Phillip Street, and Phillip was a very prominent governor as well, as we all know. So what's the difference between Macquarie Street and Phillip Street? I would beg to say nothing at all, and we should be able to protect what is in Phillip Street as much as we do in Macquarie. It's wonderful to see many faces that I saw yesterday over at the North Parramatta Female Factory, and that is another area that we are still fighting strong on. Unfortunately for council, we're doing as much as we can, but we're a little bit in the dark. We haven't had a briefing even on that site for a very long time, and we're not very aware. But getting back to this issue, we do need to stand strong, and there are things, as Brian said, that we can do from today. One of them is, and it was a suggestion yesterday, please tell everybody you know. Get the word out there. If you're on social media, then put something up about where you've been today. Tell your friends. Go to work tomorrow and tell everyone at work what you're doing and why you are here and why this is so important. Make sure that if you see articles in newspapers, write a letter. Make people realise that this is not a political thing. This is actually the community, and the community will not put up with it any longer. Brian spoke to me yesterday and he mentioned something really important, and that is that because of the way the heritage protection is structured at the moment with the local, state and national heritage, there are decisions made all over our city every week to knock down heritage. And what we're finding is all those decisions are being made in isolation. We've just seen this week a decision by the Sydney City Central Planning Panel to knock down a heritage cottage in Epping because they said it didn't actually have any relationship to the rest of Epping. Well, probably that's because they've already knocked down all the other heritage buildings. No, maybe that is the reason why. This building is as important as our North Parramatta Precinct. In 70 years, it'll be 200 years since this was built, and there will be people who will be writing the history of their mothers and their grandmothers and their great-grandmothers and grandfathers that were born in this hospital. And that's something we have to remember. It may not have been built by the convicts, but it was built as an important part of our history, we must say. But I really thank you so much for coming out today, and please follow what the council is doing, because we really are trying to help the community to achieve what we all want to achieve.
Thanks, Donna. And Donna has reminded me to ask you to like the North Parramatta Residents and to join our group, because we need as many people as possible, and there are a lot more fights happening in Parramatta. I want to now ask, please, Councillor Phil Bradley from Parramatta Council to come up and say a few words, please.
Thank you, Aidan. I'd always start by paying my respects and acknowledging the Aboriginal owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today, and that's the Parramatta people of the Garrard Nation. And I pay respect to elders past and present, and those that are emerging, and any other Aboriginal people with us. And I'd also like to specifically acknowledge the fantastic work of North Parramatta Residents Action Group. Thank you. This has been a long fight for the group, and they've done some marvellous work all around Parramatta, but particularly in North Parramatta and for heritage all around the area, like for this particular proposal. And to get 12,000 signatures onto a petition in a relatively short time is a fantastic effort of campaigning and lobbying, and I congratulate them for that. That's a wonderful effort. And I don't think Suzette Mead's here today, but she certainly needs a specific acknowledgement for doing that. In my election campaign coming to council, one of my priorities and the Greens' priorities was to protect and enhance heritage in the Parramatta local government area. And that is exactly what we intend to do on any possible opportunity we have. And I believe I have been able to do that on behalf of the residents of Parramatta. It's such an important heritage area, Parramatta, and it is absolutely critical that we preserve every bit of heritage where we can. I was really pleased, one of my first motions was to move that we advocate for to the State Planning Minister and the Federal Planning Minister for the National Heritage listing of the Parramatta Female Factory, and I was ashamed to see that some of the Liberal councillors did not support that. But 2 weeks later, the Federal Minister announced National Heritage listing on the Parramatta Female Factory. And that was a great victory, not for me, but for all of those residents that contributed to the campaign for many years and fought and lobbied, and this is exactly what we have to do again today and into the forthcoming weeks to protect wonderful heritage buildings like Willow Grove and St George's Terraces just along the road here. Since being on council, we've had enormous threats to heritage buildings all around the place. We've got a big threat to Roxy Theatre at the moment that we'll have to campaign for as well, and save that from an enormous high-rise behind it. We've also had Harrisford House with 2 big developments either side of it, and it's really important that we work on protecting them as well. I was particularly pleased to second Donna Davis's amendment in council, Councillor Davis. That was an excellent proposal, and I saw that before I saw the Lord Mayor's minute, and I believe the Lord Mayor may well have acted on Donna's proposal in initiating his own Lord Mayoral minute, but to at least his credit that he did that, that was a good thing, but he left out some key components. And one of those key components was to engage with North Parramatta Residents Action Group in terms of consultation, and that was deleted from the proposal, not by, of course, the Labor councillors or me and some of the independents who supported the view that that should stay, but by others. So I think that's been a great shame that they did not support that, and that there's not a presence here today by any Liberal councillors that I can see here, unless there's any that like to come forward. So I think we should remember that for the future, and consider other options for this site. The museum doesn't have to be here on a floodplain. I've received some information from our engineers about flood levels here. Over Lennox Bridge, the probable maximum flood level will be 4 metres above the Lennox Bridge if we ever are unlucky enough to have that flood level. So you can imagine how much it will flood through here. It won't be as high as it comes through this area, but certainly it will flood the ground floors through here and any basements of the building for museum. There are other excellent sites where we don't need to touch these wonderful heritage buildings at this site. We were really pleased at the Parramatta Female Factory event yesterday to hear proposals, for example, for a national identity museum on the site of the Parramatta Female Factory, and that would reuse it appropriately. So such a proposal for adaptive reuse of some of the buildings on that site could be used to identify and to celebrate Aboriginal history, colonial history, immigration history, refugees who've come into this country. It could celebrate the whole identity of a great cross-section of Australia. And that's what would be a really appropriate use, and in particular a national women's history component would be extremely appropriate for that site. But our priority right now is to save this, and Donna Davis's amendments to that were particularly directed towards that as well, and the valuation issue. And I think that's another critical issue that many of you are not aware of in terms of valuation. We need to know what's happened to that business case. I know Labor and David Shoebridge from the Greens were fearsome in cross-examining the government about that matter in the upper house of the state parliament. And we need to know a lot more about what happened there, about the sale value, as Councillor Davis indicated. We suspect we might have been cheated on this site, and part of that money might have gone to pay for some of the other developments that were promised in the state election, and that's what we still need to find out, what's gone on behind the scenes on that. We can't even get half of the cost of the new aquatic centre that we need to replace the one that they demolished without consultation with current council. Shame indeed, shame. So that's not a big amount of money. I'm currently been campaigning, and I intend to put another motion up at next council meeting to increase the share that the public gets of value uplift in council development. At the moment, for above our local environment plan, for medium-rise development, we get 20% of $750 a square metre. That's about $150 a square metre, when we know in the CBD valuations are in the order of $1,500 to $2,500, I'm reliably told. So that means we, as for public infrastructure that we so desperately need to address the needs of all these new residents that are coming into Parramatta, we only get about 10%, less than 10% probably, and the developers get 90%. So that's something we really have to look at carefully to try to improve the deal that the public gets in any developments, medium-rise developments in particular, ones I'm referring to in Parramatta, and that we get the proper public social infrastructure that we all deserve in Parramatta for a decent standing of livability in Parramatta. So thank you very much for letting me speak today, and I wish you all the best in your future campaigning and lobbying, which we all must do. Thank you.
Heritage buildings to do that. You just don't. Sadly, the only winners from the New South Wales government's plan to put part of the Powerhouse Museum in Parramatta will be developers. Now, many of you, I'm guessing, read the local papers like I do, and you would have seen that our local Member of Parliament, Geoff Lee, when asked about saving the local Terraces, his response he said, "I'm a realist." Well, Geoff, have a look at this crowd. This is your reality check. We're here. We're larger we're twice as real. And this is your reality check. Exactly. So, friends, listen, if we are serious about protecting Parramatta's heritage, what we've got to do together is make the Berejiklian government history.
Where is it?
Thanks very much, Liz. I now want to ask Paul Garrard to come up.
Friends, it's sad that we come together today to have to defend our heritage. Over the years, the last 50 years, we've fought to save Elizabeth Farm, the oldest house in Australia. We fought to save Hamlin Cottage. That was going to become a car park. We've ensured that there's legislation to look after Parramatta Park because there was nothing there to support it and protect it. So these protestations that have gone on over the 90s came to a head back when what the government did is set up what they call a regional environment plan for Parramatta. Now that was supposed to look at accessibility to Parramatta, urban design for Parramatta, and also heritage for Parramatta. And we thought all these issues had disappeared, but sadly they're still with us. And I want to take you through some of the thought comments of the Upper House inquiry. I think you deserve to know what happened there. This is important to understand the context of this debate and the mess that we find ourselves in and the bureaucratic bungling that's gone on. These fights and many more reflect the struggles in a city like Parramatta, a developing city that has to look at the past as well as promote the future. Now, what happened at the Upper House inquiry, we saw a situation where Amanda Chadwick was concentrated on, and of course Greg Dyer. They talked about the heads of agreement and how it was aligned to the policies of the former Parramatta City Council and those of the new. Well, that's absolute rubbish. There was no alignment at all with the former policies and what the government wishes to do on this site. The administrator went on to say, consistent with our cultural strategy, we are to establish a global city that is rich in history. Well, what a contradiction. And, you know, she's effectively thrown the baby out with the bathwater with that particular statement. Amanda Chadwick used the report to Council on the 15th of April of 2015 to report that the foreshores, 1.5 kilometres of it from the Lennox Bridge to James Roos Drive, was a substance to putting together a plan for the government for this particular site. Put briefly, she had no commission at all to enter into any new vision or new priority statement for the council, especially when she was in caretaker mode. Remember, she signed off on Willow Grove on the 27th of July 2017, less than 2 months after a council was to be elected. Now, as for the Upper House inquiry, to put bluntly, both Greg Dyer and Amanda Chadwick handled the truth very loosely. When questioned, Greg Dyer was asked, was there a council resolution of the previous council in support of the sale? He answers, yes there was. So that's what guided Chadwick, he's asked. That's right. Well, I want to know that, I know Greg has a bit of trouble determining whether he dropped that ball when he was the wicketkeeper back in 1980s, but he certainly dropped the ball when he gave that answer, because there was no resolution at all, put bluntly, and the comments that he made in the Upper House inquiry is simply a lie, a blatant mistruth, and I don't mind going on the record about that. When confronted with the information that there was heritage on the site, Greg Dyer stated that it was a requirement of all key buildings in the CBD that they would have a required design excellence. Dyer was asked, well, on that basis, is it true that the historical value and the heritage value of a number of the properties in that development will be affected? Dyer replies, now this is your CEO, he replied, well, there's some locally listed heritage and that'll need to be dealt with. Now, Mr. David Shorebridge, assisting the inquiry, then states to Dyer, but this would be a state significant project and none of the local design rules will be binding on them. He went on to say of Amanda Chadwick, he said, you have been an administrator for 12 months and you don't know that? The inquiry then confronted Dyer. Again, Mr. Dyer, you had signed off on over 5,000 square metres and your attitude is, we don't care any longer, it's not my problem anymore, let's get rid of the heritage items and incorporate them in the 5,000 square metres. Effectively running the city, we had Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. Friends, as you can see, our public officials do have a lot to answer for their behaviour on this site. If this was a private development, it would be before a commission as well. And it wouldn't be the upper house, it'll be the other one. It'll be the other one. This would be in the same category as Canterbury Bankstown at the moment. And I think, quite frankly, I don't know who worked out who was going to go to the upper house, but I find it rather unusual that I wasn't given the opportunity in the upper house inquiry to ensure that these people who spoke on oath and lied, that I wasn't given the opportunity to comment on the lies that they told the upper house. Friends, I'm pleased that you have turned up here today. We need to be very resolute in this particular issue. I want to see Parramatta Council put up some very, very strong resolutions in respect of what's going on here. You know, it's okay, fine to be having deputations downtown. That should have happened 2 years ago, but the administrator, they're the resolutions that got passed before. They never happened because the council got sacked and the administrator didn't follow it through. So it all comes back to accountability. And the people that you have to keep accountable are your public officials, and the people that have to be kept accountable are people like your state member, Geoff Lee. But quite frankly, he has no accountability at all. Thank you for turning up and keep the fight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. We did have a couple of people, I think, were a bit out of speeches now. I think we've had enough. So, and also Brian has to leave in about 5 minutes, so I really want to get a photo with him. But just one last thing I want to ask you to do. I've got Brian's notes as a solution for a way forward. And Brian is moving that the National Trust believes that there should be a moratorium on any action to demolish heritage structures. And firstly, we need to clarify the various planning proposals. We insist on the integration of existing sites for future development, and we want to establish a mechanism for community involvement and monitoring of what goes on. Can we have a seconder? Can we please endorse that as a motion for this group here today? Can you please stand? And can I ask you to please say, Save Willow Grove.
Save Willow Grove.
Save Willow Grove.
Save Willow Grove.
The last thing I'm going to ask you to do is to please stand here. Everyone bunch in. Can I get Brian to the front, please? It's carried unanimously. Can I get Brian to the front, please? And I'm going to try and get someone to take a photo as well.